Okay, so this is the commercial loan scenario for investment office with no historical financials. So what we're trying to accomplish on these videos is to walk through all of the scenario, the questions we're asking, and try to get to the end where we can actually offer specific advice to the borrower of what loan product or what direction we think is probably best suited for him or her. So, so again, today we're talking about a seasoned investor who's buying an office building. There's no historical financials. The property cash flows currently, meaning in the current period with the rent roll and everything, but we don't have any expenses in the past. So the seller didn't keep any books or records. And so that obviously is a challenge that we face. So we obviously always start with the asset information. Tell me a little bit about the building, you know, when it was built, what the square footage is, if there's any historical environmental issues, you know, how big is the land, how many buildings could there possibly be, and et cetera, condition. So it's a 10,000 square foot office building in decent shape. There was no environmental issues, and probably built in the late 1990s. So I think we're okay there. The next one is the urgency factor. So what's driving you? Again, we're really hammering in on this idea of urgency. What is driving you to do this at this time? Why can't you wait? What's so important about, you know, buying this building? Well, he was under contract. So that shows us a level of commitment, and the numbers work well within the loan. So we knew that he was generally committed to the project. At least it's one way we can identify. So we move to the next, say, okay, we're good there, check. Loyalty is us trying to identify what their level of loyalty is and working with people. And so we ask questions. What other lenders are you talking to, and what has been their feedback? It's a assumed question, and we knew that he had talked to another bank, but they can't get to the loan to value that he needs. So that's part of it. Why aren't you going with them? Well, they can't quite get to my loan to value. Okay, well, what loan to value do you need? Well, I need 75%. Okay. And if we're able to get 75%, is that something that works for you? You're sort of following the train of thought here, trying to gather the information, see if you can get some level of commitment from them so you're not wasting time. And they just said to come back, basically told them to come back if they don't do it. So I'm always kind of pushing back to see how loyal they are, if we can really make something work. That was a check on that because we could get their viability. Yet I'm trying to find out, okay, well, got urgency down, got loyalty down, but does the deal make sense? Because, you know, it could easily not. We're looking at cash flow, credit, collateral, and credibility. So again, I'm asking, on an investment property, remember that I'm more focused on the NOI than I am really the net tax return. So it could be the tax returns that we want to get for the property he or she is buying. But remember, we don't have historical information on this. So we're still trying to find out what is his net income on the company tax returns last year, not gross, but what hit the bottom line. What's his personal income on the tax returns? Well, we knew he had a couple of partners in this. He was a CPA by trade. And we knew that he had pretty good income, although it was complicated. He had a lot of entities. There were multiple borrowers with reasonable debt and good cash. So once we got a gauge on that, we were comfortable that, you know, that was a check for us. They didn't have a lot of negative cash flow outside. They've been doing this for probably 10, 15 years. So we knew they'd been in business for a long time. We always want to find out, you know, if they'd had any bankruptcy, foreclosures, short sales, lawsuits in the last 5 years. So that's a question we can definitely ask and want to ask for sure. And then in his particular case, great credit, no issues whatsoever. So that's great. And then who are the tenants? Again, now we're drilling down at the property level. So who are the tenants? How long have they been there? How long are the leases? You know, how are the tenants' businesses doing? And could that be risky, the type of tenant? You know, what percentage does the tenant take of the space? I mean, if they take half the space, we need to know more about that tenant. We might need financials or sales figures on the tenant. So we're trying to get a sense for that tenant to find out if these are solid leases that we can bank on. Well, thankfully, they were local tenants with 3 to 5 year leases, and the businesses were doing fine. No issue there. And he wanted 75% loan to value. So we were good with the viability. Now we're moving to expectations. So again, what specifically are they looking for? What rate are they looking for? What loan to value? Do they want a prepayment penalty or not? What's the turnaround time needed? For him in specific, most people are gonna have a gauge. He wanted a high loan to value. So he wanted 75%. Obviously he was rate sensitive, and he was obviously a negotiator on fees. So you took all of that, you got something no historical, it's an investment property, you got good outside cash flow for the borrowers. Where do you go? You know, because remember, for investment properties, you're either life insurance company, if the size is correct. He didn't want that because he didn't like the prepayment penalty for a life company, so that was out. CMBS, it's too small, not going to work. Local bank. We actually went with a credit union. And because the credit union was fine to go to 75%, they were fine with the fact there was no history on the expenses. And so we just had to understand their cash flow outside, the cash flow currently, and get our arms around what were probably the gauge of expenses on the property running that. So it took us a little bit of legwork to make sure we understood, so that when we got to order an appraisal, that we're not going to run into an issue from a valuation perspective. So we recommended a credit union because they had high, you know, good LTV, 75%. They had great interest rates, but they were going to charge a 1% fee as well. Well, so were we. He balked a little bit on that, so we ended up each shaving about a quarter off to be able to get to where we needed to. So it's a little give and take to make a deal work. That's pretty normal for us to do it. But it ended up being a success. We bought the building, closed on time. And so that's sort of how we made the recommendation and what direction we ended up going for a investment office with no historical financials, which will happen from time